Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nadia Pratiwi Kasim. In this video, I will talk about analyzing poetry My Heart Lifts Up and the material about history of literature and phenomenology and criticism. In the first meeting, we discussed about analyzing a poem, namely a poem entitled My Heart Lifts Up. The poem My Heart Lifts Up is about the simple beauty of a rainbow. In particular, a rainbow in the sky causes the speaker's heart to lift up. The poet remarks that he felt this way as a child as well as an adult and hopes he may always have that receptivity to make life worth living. The poem proclaims a state of childhood as he grows into part of a natural linkage of all the ways of one's existence. The poet is telling us about the feeling he gets, has always gotten, and will always get when he sees a rainbow in the sky. His heart rejoices. He says that if he were ever to stop feeling this joy, he'd want to die. He parents the paradox or contradictory statement that the child is the father of the man. In other words, our adult selves still contain the kernel of our childhood selves. He wants his days to be perhaps like the days of a child, filled with happiness and tied together by a reverence for nature. In the second meeting, we discussed about periods of American literature. Here are some of the most commonly agreed open periods of American literature from the colonial period to the present. The colonial period of American literature spans the time between the founding of the first settlement at Jamestown to the outbreak of the Revolution. The writings of this time center on religious, practical, or historical themes. And then, during the Revolutionary Age, 1765 until 1790, some of the greatest documents of American history were authored. In 1776, Thomas Paine authored Common Sense and Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of the Independence. Next, the early national period. The writers of this new American literature wrote in the English style, but the settings, themes, and the character were authentically American. In addition, poets of this time wrote poetry that was relatively independent of English precursor. The period 1000. Next, the early national period. The writer of this new American literature wrote in the English style, but the settings, themes, and character were authentically American. In addition, poets of this time wrote poetry that was relatively independent of English precursors. The period 1828 until 1865 in American literature is commonly identified as the Romantic period in America. The writers of this period produced works of originality and excellence that helped shape the ideals and literary aims of many American writers. The Civil War, American literature entered into the realistic period. The major form of literature produced in this era was realistic fiction. And then the years 1900 until 1940 marked American literature's naturalistic period. Naturalist claims to give an even more accurate Naturalism claims to give an even more accurate depiction of life than realism. In accordance with a post-Darwinian thesis, naturalistic writers hold that the character of their works are merely hanger-order animals whose characters and behavior is entirely based upon heredity and environment. Between 1940 and 1939, American literature entered into a phase which is still referred to as the beginning of modern literature. Like their British counterparts, the American modernists experimented with subject matter, form, and style and produced achievements in all literary genres. Next, the American modernist period also produced. Sudah napakantara. Next, the American modernist period also produced many other writers that are considered to be writers of modernist period subclasses. In 1959 marked the beginning of the contemporary period of American literature. This period includes an abundance of important American literary figures spanning from World War II into the new millennium. During the 1950, figurized anti-establishment and anti-traditional literary movement emerged. Much writing of the 1960 and 1970 referred to as counterculture writing continued the literary ideals of the mid movements, but in a more extreme and vivid manner. Currently, next, in the third meeting, we discussed about periods of English literature. Here are some of the most commonly argued open periods of English literature, from the Old English period to the present. During the Old English period, written literature began to develop from oral tradition, and in the 8th century, poetry written in the vernacular Anglo-Saxon, or also known as Old English, appeared. The Middle English period consists of the literature produced in the 4.5 centuries between the Norman The Middle English period consists of the literature produced in the 4.5 century between the Norman Conquest of 1008. The Middle English period consists of the literature produced in the 4.5 century between the Norman Conquest of 1066 and about 1500, when the standard literary language derived from the dialect of the London area became recognizable as modern English. Prior to the second half of the 14th century, vernacular literature consisted primarily of religious writings. The second half of the 14th century produced the first great age of secular literature. And while the English Renaissance began, Romantic period. In general, Romantic literature can be characterized by its personal nature, its strong use of feeling, its abundant use of symbolism, and its exploration of nature and the supernatural. In addition, the writings of the Romantics were considered innovative based on their belief that literature should be spontaneous, imaginative, personal, and free. Next, the Neoclassical period. The Neoclassical period of English literature was much influenced by contemporary French literature, which was in the midst of its graduate age. The literature of this time is known for its use of philosophy, reason, skepticism, wit, and refinement. Much like the English literature Renaissance, the Neoclassical period can be defined into three subsets: the Restoration, the Augustan Age, and the Age of Sensibility. Finally, the modern period. The modern period artists to British literature written since the beginning of World War I. The authors of the modern period have experimented with subject matter, form, and style, and have produced achievements in all literary genres. Following World War II, the postmodern period of British literature developed. Postmodernism blends literary genres and style and attempts to break free and modernist forms. While the British literary scene at the turn of the new millennium is crowded and varied, the authors still fall into the categories of modernism and postmodernism. However, with the passage of time, the modern era may be organized and expanded. Phenomenology and criticism. The philosophical perspective and method called phenomenology was founded by German thinker Edmund Husserl. He proposed that consciousness is deliberate international act. He intentionally did not mean that it was intentionally done, but always direct at object, in other words, to be aware of something. Is plot in dramatic or narrative works formed by event and action, because these are given and ordered to achieve certain artistic and emotional effect. This seems simple because of action or including verbal discourse and physical means by which they show their moral and dispositional qualities.